Oh, Shonda says we look fabulous. Thanks, Shonda.
Oh.
Eric's here from Indianapolis. Kathy's here from Texas. Hi, Kathy. And we know some folks are here from representing nonprofits. Others are here representing congregations, the church, maybe the national church. Others of you are unaffiliated with the disciples. You can feel free to share that with us if you'd like. But we'll try and take that for granted as we talk with one another to let you know if we can't speak to every demographic at once, we'll at least try and let you know which constituency kind of that we're speaking to in that moment. Hi, Al from UMCP. Good to have you with us. And I do see a good mix of nonprofits and congregations here, so wonderful. Again, if you're having any trouble hearing us or your video's not clear, give us a shout and include your cell phone number and I'll try and troubleshoot with you. All right, we're coming up at 35 after the hour. So I'm gonna go ahead and start making introductions and getting started. Welcome again to Welcoming Abundance in 2018. My staff colleague Larry and I really tried to find a title that would rhyme with 2018, but there's just really not that many words that rhyme with 18. So this is the best that we could do. But we are excited to host this space, to create this space so we can talk about welcoming abundance. A lot of times fundraising can take us to a place that we just habitually go when we think about money or when we think about asking for money. We may have our own sort of stuff attached to that, but we just want to reframe this conversation and make this space available for us to think about it in terms of opening ourselves and our organizations and our work up to the abundance that is already out there to help fund what God has already given us to do. We want to, and we brought together some really great minds to share with us together about ways that they've tried, maybe mistakes they've made, successes that they've had, and the things that they've done in their work that may be able to encourage or inspire or inform you. So first, what I want to do before we get into it deep is let you know a little bit about the Incubate program. I made reference to it earlier, but didn't get into it very much, but I'd like to do that now. So the National Benevolent Association works with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the area of health and social service ministries. We have 3 program areas that we work through: Initiate, Incubate, and Connect, and we're going to focus on Incubate today. Incubate helps to empower, encourage, and support disciples who are starting new health and social service entities. So they're building social service and health-focused startups from scratch. And we try and equip them with resources, with professional expertise, and when we can, with dollars to help them get off the ground and do the work they've been called to do with excellence and in a sustainable way. So this webinar is one of many resources that we offer in order to help accomplish that mission. If you want to learn more about Incubate or MBA in general, you can find us at mbacares.org/incubate. And we look forward to hearing from you through perhaps our inquiry form on that page. So, I see Stephanie has joined us. Hi, Stephanie. We are excited to have you here. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to introduce our illustrious panel here today. So in a frame and in a class all of her own is Leanne Hahn. Leanne is here from Woodhaven. Woodhaven is a nonprofit. Remind me, Leanne, in what city and state?
Columbia, Missouri.
In Columbia, Missouri. And she is the Director of Development at Woodhaven. So we're excited to have you, Leanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In the other box that has 4 beautiful faces in it, you'll see, starting from the left, it should be on your left, is Jordan Bless. Jordan, can you wave? Jordan is the new Director of Development for the National Benevolent Association, and we're excited to have him join our team. Next to him is Bethany Watkins Lowry. Bethany, that's her waving. Bethany is the Director of Development for Church Extension and Hope Partnership. We're excited to have her from the denominational level with the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Next to Bethany is the Reverend Yvonne Gilmore. Yvonne is the Associate Dean at Disciples Divinity House at the University of Chicago. Did you already wave, Yvonne? That's Yvonne. Sharing love from the Chicago side. I know there's a little bit of Chicago love on the participant list. And finally, on the right side of your screen is the Reverend April Luton. April is the Vice President of Development and Marketing at MBA, brings with her a wealth of experience and expertise, and she's going to be our moderator today. So there is one more box on your screen where a handsome gentleman is there on his own. His name is Larry Morris III. Larry Morris is the Program Associate for the MBA Incubate Initiative. Larry helped put this webinar together, and he and I will be doing behind the scenes care for this webinar. So you'll see our videos and screens go off and sound go off in a bit, but we're still here and can still see the chat window and the Q&A window, and you can reach out to us in that way. But in this moment, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to April so she can get started with our discussion today. Thanks so much, April.
Thank you. First, thank you for all who are online. Even though I can't see you, it's great to even see you on chatter on chat. So thanks for joining us. So thank you to the panel too, because I really kind of started the invitation of let's just have a conversation and people will be watching us. But of course, things always get much larger. And thank you, of course, Leanne, for joining us from Columbia. Yeah. We prepared some questions, we prepared some conversation. We're going to start with some conversation and then we'll bump back over. I know many of you have submitted really interesting questions. So we're hopefully going to take time to address some of those as well. But, you know, one of the first things is we're, halfway through January. How did your year end go? How did the end of the year go? And, you know, are you still doing things to wrap up the year end? I mean, no, Jordan and I can say a little about what we do, but want to hear just reflections from the group.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Year end went well. It's always a busy time. Church extension side, we're a financial ministry in the general church. So, you know, we have kind of all of the bookkeeping. It's not just the donation, and that all works together. But year end went really well in general in the office, and specifically in our little corner of the office known as the development department. And really what we're focused on right now is our year-end thank you letters, where we give the complete snapshot. Our department, our ministry, Church Extension and Hope Partnership are in partnership together, and we have donors who give close places to multiple areas within, and we like to do a collective thank you along with some year-end stats of kind of the programming success of the ministries, so that folks can know this is how much dollar you gave, but also this is how much ministry that helped motivate and fund.
Hey, for us at UChicago, it really is the middle of our fiscal year. We're on a July 1 to June 30 cycle, and we do mailings, you know, postal service mailings twice a year. And so one for us is in November, and then the other is in the spring, and then there's segmentation within that. So we'll do large mailing, but then, you know, particular populations, our board is solicited in a different way than alumni, and alumni is solicited a different way than Friends of the House. And then there are particular funds, you know, and causes that where that's another segment. You know, during this year, I think for a lot of traditional nonprofits, they might see 60% of their, you know, returns come in at this time of year. I think for us, it's about halfway. And so certainly, I think like Bethany mentioned, you know, thanking people in particular, you know, special ways, finding special ways to do that. We also use January to thank our recurring givers, so that they've said, you know, don't send me thank you note every month. I don't want 12 of them. And so we do send, a statement for the whole calendar year to our recurring givers. And so we try to make that special. And thankfully the recurring giving program has been growing. And then, try to track if there are, folks who typically give and we didn't kind of see, something from them. And we try to follow up as well at this time of year, and then to plan for the next year. So yeah, it's a busy time.
Great, thank you. Leanne, do you have, I would love to hear your reflections about calendar year end.
Yeah, so our year end went well too. We had a good year last year, and I would say just anecdotes that colleagues haven't already mentioned is we kind of had an exciting December in that we had a number of matching opportunities. And one was something we pursued, and one was something that was kind of fell in our lap. But that really energized December giving for us. We saw a huge return with a matching opportunity. And if you're not familiar with that, that's just where a donor or an organization says, hey, I'm going to give you $2,000 and I'll match 1-to-1 every donation. And so what's exciting is then you can go to someone and say, hey, if you give $25, that's going to be 50. So, or that's going to be matched and become 50. And so that got really exciting. So as far as year end, that's what happened. And then what we're doing to wrap that up is just a lot of acknowledgement, which I'll admit has been like a little bit, okay, who am I thinking? Who utilized the match? How am I thinking the people who provided the match? So we're kind of working through and living through that right now. And then also, as Bethany mentioned, I believe we're doing we always do a year-end thank you letter for every donor that gave in 2017, which is pulling our database and just so they have that right before their taxes. And not only is that useful and we'll probably get asked for, we kind of view it as another stewardship thing. Like, here's one more thing we want to be helpful with as you're filing your taxes. So
nice.
Yeah, and I mean we're in very much a similar place in that we are preparing those year-end giving reports so that we can remind folks how generous they have been to us throughout the year, and then also hopefully include in that a story or two that helps them get a sense of what kind of impact they made in the last year as we prepare to pivot to the next year. So,
and I would say, for those, I know Shonda from Oakland Peace Center is on, and I know you were running a matching grant as well, or matching gifts, matching donor for your year end. And I think opportunities like that, but also recognizing that each of us have organizations in which we want people to give in multiple ways and multiple times. So we'll make it really easy for any donor when you give at the year end, especially for tax purposes, the ability to give you one summarized report. And so I think that's, if anything, you heard us reflect about that. I think that we first, of course, want to thank all of our supporters, but also just make it really easy for you to know the many ways that people give. Excellent. Okay. So it is a new year. It is 2018, even though there aren't words to rhyme with 2018, apparently. What's a key activity? What's in your mind or what's on your planners that you're doing right now that's really important for your planning for the new year?
Here's what. This is like my just gospel, is developing an annual plan. I think it's so important, and it's an exercise that we spend a couple months preparing for, and we get input from programs, we get input from marketing. Our CEO, Mark, has a hand in it, and it's the perfect plan to direct your activity, and you can kind of refocus throughout the year, and you can see where you're behind and where you need to catch up. But it's also a communication between your board, you, and your CEO. And so everybody's signed off on it, and we're marching in the right direction. There's no gray area. So I think developing an annual plan is vital.
I'm super glad you led with that. I mean, for those who are logged on, I mean, it can be as simple as what's your message going to be, to as detailed as I'm sure, Leanne, you get, to a production calendar, to the notes about who's doing what and when they're doing it. And of course, you can break it down even further to that. You can be like, what are we doing on social? What are we doing for our mailed pieces? So I love that you led with an annual plan because, I think one of the first things that a lot of, especially those who are new at fundraising, say is, oh my gosh, where do you start? And in some ways, you can start as simple or you can get as detailed as you need it to be. But don't prevent it from starting you is what I would say, right? I mean, but I love that you started with an annual plan. Thanks. I mean, do you have any reflections as well?
This is also sort of part and parcel of our annual plan, but sitting down and reserving time every month to be with donors, to communicate with donors, to be face-to-face. This year, I've also added reserve time every week to get on the phone and just make phone calls, which has not been part of my practice. I'd much rather get on a plane and go visit someone over lunch at Denny's and pick up the phone and have to leave a voicemail. I'm a millennial. I don't like leaving voicemails. So not just a production plan, a broader development annual plan, but to really get a grasp on my own calendar and how I'm going to be face to face and when. And by doing it for the whole year, it becomes protected time to be face to face and stewarding the donor relationship.
Right. I'm really glad, Bethany, mentioned the stewardship, the connection with individuals, because I think there are many of you who are on that you're like, I don't have a travel budget. And the majority of your donors maybe are in your local community or in the state. But a phone call and a small touch goes a long way. One thing I remember from a longtime major gifts fundraiser is she would always make sure that she has touched a donor at least one donor a day and a meaningful touch. So it's a long email or it's a phone call or it's that visit. Because at the end of the day, you can look at your calendar and how many conference calls have you had in terms of your staff, or, we have a lot of internal communications, but I think as fundraisers, it's important to also remember if we can have that one quality touch a day, that accrues. And so, and you don't have to have huge budget to do that if you're sending an email or a phone call or that local visit. I'm going to ask another question because we started talking about an annual plan. So it's really great. You have this wonderful plan. You have strategic planning. You have all your messages of what you're going to appeal on for the coming year. And then you realize you work with other people. And things come up, right? Even in the world of academia, things can come up. And so what do you do in terms of the flexibility of your plan? How do you work with that kind of dynamic, especially for those that are working in nonprofits that advocacy is a huge piece? I mean, there could be a major issue or a major headline that it makes sense for you to address and maybe even fundraise on. So how would you respond to the flexibility related to annual planning?
I think there have to be some fundamentals. And so you make sure you build a plan mindful of, when you're gonna do direct mail solicitation. I think, you plan for investing the time, because major gifts raising is time consuming. I think, you make sure your database management is solid and you have those kind of core fundamentals. I think it's just Bethany mentioned, telephone time, that sort of thing. And so if that stuff is scheduled, then as new things kind of emerge, it's easy, I think, to shift because you already have, the groundwork set and, those fundamentals are there. But then I also think on top of the fundamentals, you think about areas of emphasis for the year, whether that's, this year I want to focus on growing recurring givers, or I could say it's like with Divinity House, we're a place where traditionally people give through sending in checks. That online stuff. We're not yet on Twitter, and part of that is
you got to know your base.
Yeah, you got to know your base. And so, if you want to grow your base in a particular direction, I think you think about this emphasis, and then as other things, kind of come in, then you can connect the dots. And I think, shift and maneuver a little better because you've taken the time to kind of think through, where your heart is and your kind of core emphases for the year.
Yeah, that's great. Speaking of just kind of knowing your donors and about planning, where do you all find that you spend most of your time?
Yikes. I would say, and mine's a little bit of a weighted answer. I'm only about 18 months old in this job, which is kind of a long time, and then like not a long time at all. So I spend a lot more time in kind of the database management part of it, and kind of getting down how we communicate with accounting, and just by nature of our mission, which is with developmental disabilities and state funding, we just have all kinds of red tape that I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So I would say database management, and then direct mail. We do 5 campaigns a year, and we're a staff of 2.5. So we spend a lot of time there. And so that's something we're looking at with year-end numbers, and then planning for next year is what's the return on those 2 activities. And I can already say one of them probably isn't a great return, and there's a better use of time. So yeah, that's where we're at.
No, and I'd echo a lot of that, Leanne, but say for me, part of it is that I have April and then Mark, our executive, who do a lot of the donor stewardship and visits, which gives me a little bit more time to focus on the direct mail and database management. It's just kind of where things are and how the load of the work is laying out currently. So.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back. It's been revealing to see the return this year, because this is my first full calendar year having directed the activities and seeing what's going on. And you can see really quickly what's a good investment of your time, or if that's something you can delegate, or kind of like your operation, what you're talking about is, can I utilize Mark and just start sending him on some visits and kind of, organizing it in that way.
How do you all, when you talk about what was effective and what wasn't, obviously the overall, did we get money, did we not? Are there other ways that you evaluate when an effort is kind of reaching your audience or is successful? I mean, what do you think about evaluation, and how do you evaluate?
We have an annual funds manager who is the master of the database. So, I mean, hats off to Kim Watkins. She intuits metrics and data collection and spreadsheets. So I will ask her a question. Can you pull this spreadsheet for me? And she'll say, well, what are you actually looking for? Yeah. What is the answer you're searching for? And then I tell her, and she gives me what I've asked for, and then she gives me the better way. But one of the things that we've started doing in the last couple of years is, because we have 2 ministries and we have 3 annual funds, we have regular donors, like annual donors, but they're very loyal to one designated area. So not only do we track recurring gifts or returning donors from year to year, we've also started tracking those who may be previous donors to one fund or one program or one area. And so we're referring to them as converted donors. So they're converted to another area of our mission and ministry. And then within, we also do a second time gift. So we see even a further segmentation of this is the second time they've come back to us, as well as new donors. So
see, we got a little. Oh, there we
go. So that's one of the things, is that we're trying to think, why folks are coming back, or why they're responding. So that's a big piece. And then we also track those who have increased gifts from last year to this year, and try to follow up and ask why.
Right. I think the simple question of asking why is a huge We had some very generous first-time donors, and you know, we'll be very honest. Both Jordan and I were just like, "Wow, that was a really generous gift." And so part of it is finding out, what was that kind of motivation, or what was that real like connection, emotional connection. One thing that I think I want to say from Bethany's reflection is that it's okay, especially for those of you who are one-person shops or maybe 1.5 shops, meaning you're the only development officer and whatever other hat that you wear, because I think a donor or anyone who's going to support you is going to enter in at any part of your organization story or mission. I think sometimes as fundraisers, we get really anxious, like, oh my gosh, you're only supporting this program, or you only know about this. And, I know I do. I mean, we have an organization, we do so much. Allow folks to enter in where they can, and then really invite them into the deeper story. I would imagine, Leanne, the same thing for you at Woodhaven is invite folks, thank them for entering where they can, and then ask and engage them to know more deeply about the extent of your organization. I think sometimes we get really anxious, like, okay, now you got to give to the whole, and sometimes you're like Bethany says, you're going to get that recurring donor who's going to give to their one area or to their one program, but we give thanks for those donors too. Two things. So because so much of us, I think all of us do a significant amount of stuff on social, how do you use your analytics to help you in terms of evaluation and planning? Analytics, I mean, some of you may be tracking websites. Some of you may be tracking your email about even what are people clicking into or the stories. I mean, can you reflect a little about how you currently or you want to use your analytics related to how you tell your story?
We don't very much.
Yes.
It's a kind of afterthought of how'd that play. I go to marketing and we'll say, hey, can you let me know how that's played on social media, or what kind of response we got to an e-blast, or gosh, a bunch of donations came in. Can you tell me, online donations came in today. Can you tell me if there was something that went out in the last 24 hours that indicates a click-through? But it's mostly, at this point, it's nice to know, but we don't use it for planning. I will say that we're reworking our website right now, and there is intentionality around metrics and analytics playing a significant role in planning in the future. We're just not quite there yet.
Fair enough.
We definitely use analytics and did move to a website that's mobile friendly, and then our sort of, Facebook viewer contact presence has grown, and trying to sort of understand those relationships. It probably doesn't surprise you that many of the people that are, see our page on Facebook are not necessarily in our database, and so trying to figure out how to cultivate relationships so that those folks have a wider, that their relationship is broader and deeper with us. But we're glad that more people are engaging DDH through that, and so definitely track it and trying to figure out a more coherent connection between those analytics, and then of course look at giving in terms of responsiveness to direct mail. Though I would say online giving has grown, it's still not the bulk of what we do, but it definitely has grown. And so even trying to kind of be aware of who's on there. I will say actually several alumni said you guys should get on Twitter, and including one next to me. But I think also noting that feedback, right, about our analytics and where we should be showing up and interacting with folks is important, definitely.
Right. Jordan, do you want to say one quick thing? Because we do use some analytics, and we will tell you one of our one of our heaviest areas of traffic is a surprise video. Our director of marketing, Casey Zeminski, who's live tweeting us right now. Thank you, Casey. She always shows and shares about how many hits our videos are getting, and that's primarily because so many of our audience members, so many of our supporters are mobile and they're watching, or they're on their laptops and they're watching. So do you want to say what we released at the end of the year? A couple of the videos we released.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we really started trying for the first time at the end of this year was a targeted Facebook campaign specifically at asking folks to give via Facebook. And we used some videos to do that because we already knew, thanks to Casey, that videos are what really drive the folks that engage us. But I mean, the other thing I'd say, especially about watching social media and online giving analytics, in terms of how it compares to folks that are still giving in the traditional ways, is remembering how much time has been invested in getting those traditional givers to give, and to not write off the online giving and the social media stuff because it doesn't return a similar return in year 1 or even year 5, right? I mean, how many of those prospects have you been sending letters to for 10 years who haven't given a gift, but they still get a letter?
Right. Or newsletter.
So to not allow yourself to get frustrated because you don't get an immediate return on what you start doing online or in social media.
Can I just follow up to that? In my first quarter in this role, I was told here's a campaign that we're wrapping up by the end of the year. We still need to raise $100,000 for it. We've raised about $100,000 already over the last 2 years, so double it, and good luck. And it was the end of the year, and we had a limited number of days because those of us who are in general ministry fundraising, there are periods of time where we have in covenant agreed to not fundraise around special offerings. And so the final quarter of the year, there's like 12 days that aren't in this covenantal period of time. So we had to be creative, and so social media was the place that we went with that. And we spent a lot of time developing videos and having these 24-hour, like massive give-a-thon type things where we were soliciting donations that had matching gifts. In that process, we raised about $50,000 over those. I think we spent 5 days actually on Facebook asking for matching gifts. But the majority of those dollars came in from our traditional donors that we made face-to-face contact and said, would you be interested in providing the matching gift, the challenge gift? And the answer was absolutely. We're so excited about this message getting out and trying something new and different. So absolutely make our gift a challenge gift. And if you don't raise the money, go ahead and keep it, keep the rest of it. So, so really it was the social media fundraising idea excited the traditional donors that we had the relationships with who wrote us checks. And the online giving through Facebook came in at a much smaller level. But we also did make some new friends from that social media initiative. So it's it really is, I think, a both and, Jordan, in
that. Before we pivot to some of the questions that you all submitted in your registration, the question about first-time donors. How do you get a first-time donor?
Ooh, so I'm really excited about this one because it's something we've struggled with. We've traditionally done an acquisition mailing, which is purchasing a list and mailing a letter. Which is a doozy. Interestingly enough, though, one of our larger donors came from an acquisition mailing, and he increased his giving this year. So kind of a shot in the dark, though. But what we're excited about this year and what I've kind of focused my annual plan around is looking at volunteering as donor acquisition. Now, that is not quite as crummy as it sounds because we're very invested in our mission and want people to spend time with the individuals and in our homes. But I think the best way for people to get invested in your mission is to see it. You can write letters and send pictures and make videos and do things all day long and throw them at people and kind of hope they see it and are touched by it. But I think what we've, at least our experience and what we think, is that if people see our mission in action and get to interact with the individuals, that's where it's at. You know, that's going to be what makes them want to learn more. And so we're kind of shifting our donor acquisition focus and our donor acquisition dollars on being intentional about volunteer recruitment and group activities. You know, and the not crummy part is we're not going to be grabby at people, because we know that, you know, time is just as important to give as treasure, and we're not diminishing that. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, so the first question that was kind of submitted, I wanted you to take some time to reflect on, Leanne, and it was around capital campaigns and building fund efforts. I know Woodhaven just completed a pretty massive capital campaign. So if you want to take just a couple of moments to reflect on that, you know, what were some key factors that really made it successful and sing for you all in terms of a capital campaign?
Yeah, I'm trying to find my notes here. Capital campaign. So yeah, we embarked on a capital campaign, and we raised $2.1 million for 2 new buildings. And kind of condensing it down, in April, you can prod me to expand on things because I get a little windy. I think what was so important about how we went about the capital campaign is we didn't just we went about it as professionally as possible. So we hired a consultant and someone that could screen our database and do a feasibility study of, do you have all the pieces that are going to make this successful? Because one of the worst things you can do is embark on a capital campaign and not meet, you know, it doesn't look good to not meet your goal. Sure. So even though that took some upfront investment and some faith by our board, I think that was really key to make it, you know, a very professional campaign. And that also meant investing in some organizational things that allowed Liz, our marketing person, it became a full marketing position, and she was able to create really professional pieces and brochures and things, which sometimes is an eye roll. You're like, oh, it's so important. I think it adds to the professionalism. And people want to join a winning team. So when you're asking for those funds, not only do you want to relay the mission, but you just want to have that air of, you know, we have this totally together and this has been completely thought through, and here's the steps kind of. So yeah, that's, I think, what made it successful. I was going to talk about the having the consultant. What else, April?
How long was the campaign? Can I ask that? Was it a few years? How long?
3 years, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to affirm, Leanne, your point about sometimes you have to spend a little money to make money. And it meant that, you know, bringing on a staff person that was only partial to a full-time so that they could really prepare those materials and those plans. I mean, I can only imagine that also really solidified your development team too. So I think that's something for those organizations that can do it and that have a little bit of asset, or they have that special donor that will help them, you know, get a full-time staff person, even for the time of your campaign, or, you know, I think seeing what's possible and seeing what kind of investment has to be made in order to, because, you know, capital campaigns, we aim high.
Yeah. Well, and I think you want to be, yeah, and I think it can be intimidating for a staff of one. And I've been in development places where they're like, you're not supposed to be spending money, you need to make it, you know, and you definitely want to do that, but you have to have that investment up front. And it just pays off in the end. So even if you're a one-person shop and you're intimidated by it, it may not be a full-fledged hiring a consultant and creating things, but even having just a feasibility study, because you might be a heck of a go-getter and can still accomplish those things, but just getting some expertise in a capital campaign, because there's such a different beast, is well worth your investment, I think.
It is. I think now would be a good time for me to let you know that Church Extension offers a capital fundraising service as one of the ways that we support the ministry of local congregations and disciples-related ministries in general. We're not limited to serving congregations in terms of assisting with capital fundraising campaigns. And what we have discovered in that process is that really, truly the number one mistake congregations or organizations make is thinking that they can do a capital campaign completely on their own with their own resources. It really is that outside perspective to kind of help you organize, because it's a different beast than a major gifts campaign, than a planned giving campaign, or even an annual stewardship campaign. They just look and feel different and require a different perspective and energy. So that, and then also you have to be clear on your vision. What is it exactly that you're raising the money for? Vagueness, we're raising this for the building, is not enough. There has to be concrete clarity about what and why, and your community of supporters, whether it's a local congregation perspective or a wider community organization, those who are your stakeholders, who are your investors through charitable giving, have to be on board with that, which is really where feasibility studies are very, very helpful. But then also, you know, the thing we constantly are telling our partners is if God gives you the vision, God will give you the resources. We've learned that from, you know, the desert. You know, there is manna that comes. So, you know, capital fundraising campaigns, building campaigns are daunting because they're big.
Yeah.
They're long, and they require people to say, we are in this with you for the long haul. So don't be afraid. If God gives you the vision, God will provide the resources. So move forward with it and move forward in faith.
And one little thing I want to add to that I think added to the success of the campaign was the longevity of our development effort in the office, because we created a reputation and we had an established donor base, that we were communicating and stewarding and cultivating $25 gifts for 10 years, 15 years. And so there was this trust that had built up too. And I think that's important. And so if you're thinking in the future you want to do a capital campaign, it's so worth it to really tighten up your database and your stewardship practices, because that's what turns into capital type gifts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just repeat it again, just in case it wasn't heard the first time or wasn't clear. Bethany Watkins Lowry and Church Extension and Hope Partnership are there as resources. So please follow up. You can definitely find all of us on our websites, but that is a resource that I think is helpful for the church, for regions, for partners out there. I would also throw in another financial ministry that is a resource, is Christian Church Foundation. So let's name that as well. All right, so another question that came in, and this is I'm gonna pivot this towards Yvonne. Let's talk about special events. So you have a special event, something fancy, and how do you actually generate revenue for it? So we know how to create excitement through social or
that events are not the number one way to do fundraising.
No.
Yeah. So wait, what kind of fundraising if you want to raise money? If you do have events, though, that I think thinking seriously about sponsorships and partners, you know, that have capacity. So having some really capacious partners and sponsorships is significant. And then I think, you know, preparing for volume that a volume and a vision, right? I think are two key things. So that I'm like, if the vision's there and there is excitement and you have high volume, then you're more likely to yield what you need. But events are costly. So I do just want to name that there are all kinds of
both money, there's time.
Food, they're time intensive, and then there's food, there's all kinds of equipment that is attached to it, and lots of planning there. But if there in fact is excitement, and I think you can get the sort of right kind of donors with capacity, that's really key to being successful at an event.
Bethany or Leanne, you want to say anything about special events?
I think Yvonne got it.
Celebration. it's part of the long haul. I mean, that's really what it is. It's about celebrating donors and exciting new ones.
I mean, and I'll say, right, that there's different, so like doing a dinner is costly. I'm gonna create a scholarship in my grandmother's name as a part of the Disciples Divinity House celebration of our 125th anniversary. So I'm thinking about doing an event at Michigan Park Christian Church where I grew up. But this event is not going to have, sort of huge costs, but she was a music educator for 35, 40 years in the school system, as well as actually at the church, as well. And so it'll be, an event that is a sort of celebration of music, but that aims to raise money, right? So that kind of event is less costly to put on. But I think you just want to be real clear about the time that you're investing and about the cost so that you yield the rate of return, because it's easy to miss some things.
I just want to do a quick recap because I think our internet was a little unstable in the beginning. In case you didn't hear some of our reflections, is that special events are not the first thing you want to do when you're starting out fundraising. if you that's one takeaway. Don't leave into a special event. But that if you are going to do it, Bethany mentioned, let this be part of your long haul plan. And that to acknowledge that to do events well, whether it's going to be as simple as a small gathering or a huge multi-course dinner, make sure that it really reflects who you are and your mission, and to do it well, and to make time for the planning, because that will, the kind of perception of how people who attended your event, it matters, right? So you want to plan it well. You want to know what you're going into before you say yes to it.
I'd say be clear on what the goal of the event is, right? Because there are different kinds of special events. If it's to say thank you, that's one kind of special event. If the purpose of the event is to raise the money, then make sure you ask for specific amounts of money.
Right. Right.
So it's just, again, it goes back to having the plan and being clear about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and communicating that to, I wholeheartedly agree, communicating that to the attendees, because sometimes you get focused on getting the numbers in the door, and you're like, oh, just come, it's food and a celebration. We're kind of going to ask you for money. Like, no, this is a this is a fundraiser. We want you to celebrate. So, yeah.
Right. Someone asked the question, and I think it's interesting for all of us as we consider our donors of support or our base of support, is how do we reach out to people who aren't sitting, if you're in a congregation, in a pew, or who aren't, quote unquote, in the religious community? How do we ensure that our message and our invitation is open to all? I welcome that kind of reflection.
I mean, I think messaging, right, is one area, and certainly important to us at Disciples Divinity House, where indeed we are connected to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and a good number of our donors are as well, but a good number of our donors are not connected to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And so we try to, whether it's our newsletter, which isn't a direct ask, but is a communication piece, we try to be cognizant that everyone doesn't have the same frame of reference. And so as we, are writing articles, or we're describing what our house scholars are doing or studying, or what their vision is, we try to be mindful of the wider landscape, so that our materials are written so that anyone, can connect with them and try to locate our, even religious commitments, right, within the wider nexus of education, so that we're making just as many connections and allowing as many entry points as possible, and ways to support us, ways to get connected, ways to partner, right, with us. So I think messaging is key, and then also, finding meaningful partners, both churches, but also outside of the church, so that people see it's safe, that you can make meaningful, connections, and not just be a person that, identifies religiously. And then I think whether it's, Leanne talked about the getting a list, whether you get a list or even you use like Facebook Boost, which is pretty inexpensive, but you can itemize, right, in terms of zip code, you can itemize in terms of age demographics, you can itemize in terms of interests. And so in terms of finding, and having exposure to non-religious folk, that those are some avenues to advance in that way.
Well, I think one thing I want to tag on that I think is exciting that we're doing and in focusing on doing is, and maybe a tangible thing in your community, is find an event that's already going on. So we've got the True False Film Festival in Columbia coming up, and we've worked with their team to make sure that there's accommodations for our individuals to volunteer. So that's not a religious event, that's a, kind of an artistic community, but we're just getting out in front of them and participating. So it doesn't always have to be as overt as like presenting to a new group or making sure you send a flyer. It can just be a participant in kind of a diverse community activity.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing we will say is I like the idea of the participation and being out there and being present, but I also know something that Jordan and I always hone in on is bring some names home. Bring some contact home, because that's really how you're going to be able to, it's great.
Yeah.
If you build that into your calendar and your activities to go out and to be present and to make those connections, but at the end of the day, you still need people to appeal to during your time of appeal. You need direct names and phone numbers and emails and mailing addresses. So do that. Don't be afraid to say, I would love, or Twitter handles, or, I think there are many ways that we can track people these days. And so make sure that you bring the solidity of the contact back to you. And back to the organization, I would just add in. So I want to, I know we're growing short on time, but I want to say one question that was asked is, how do we show appreciation to our donors? And what are some good ways that we do that? So I know all of you are creative, and how do you show appreciation?
We send anniversary cards on the anniversary of their gift.
Oh, that's cool.
And we that idea developed from a contact through TCU, so we can't take full
TCU.
But again, disciples ministries of different kinds partnering together.
I think it's same thing. We like to send pure appreciation type communications that aren't solicitations. And if you have a mission or a ministry that the people you're serving or your mission can we have our individuals create the art for the cards. And so that's,
your cards are great.
Yeah, they're awesome. So.
So one of the questions that came in is, how do we request regular givers? I think the concept of the question is how to move like one-time donors to recurring givers and to repeat givers. I mean, what are ways that we all do to do that?
I'll say at Disciples of Bethany House, if it's to a particular fund, then the second year, say you gave to this year that we created the Amy Northcutt Fund. And so say we would send a solicitation saying thank you so much for your previous gift, you know, and want to invite you, you know, we're trying to build it, you know, to the particular level and reach a certain goal and invite you to give to that. And then, you know, maybe give them some additional information about the institution. That's one way. And then I think more broadly, as they receive, you know, we also let them know they're added to the mailing list, and so they're going to get the newsletter and they're going to learn about additional initiatives. And so, you know, both in terms of mailing, but then beginning to establish relationships. So, you know, you do some cultivation, additional cultivation is significant. I think that will lead to an ask. I was reminded recently that contact is not an ask, an ask is an ask. And so, yeah.
Should we repeat that?
The contact is not an ask, only an ask, A-S-K, is an ask. You know, but having the contact so that you can do a meaningful ask.
Yeah, and the word you said that I think is key is that so much of what we've talked about and what fundraising is about having relationships with people.
Right.
So those folks that April and I were pleasantly surprised by their first time gift at year end, it's asking that question why. It's getting to know them, it's building the relationship, figuring out what motivates them to give, and asking in that way.
Right.
You know, do you prefer email solicitation? What is the best way for us to contact you? And yeah, making sure that they know that they are valued for their relationship with the organization or the congregation.
One thing, because I think it was mentioned in a question that came in, is feeling apologetic about asking. So several of us enter into fundraising at different, some of us have been doing it for a while. Some of us, this is kind of your first organization or your first time doing fundraising. At this point, I think I would say, at least for mentors and for my practices, you've got to just ask. And you're going to ask in a lot of different ways. You're going to ask in your traditional letters, in your mailings, on social. You don't only have to ask. Others in your organization should ask, your volunteers, your board members. Finding ways to make that direct ask and appeal, and multiple times a year, multiple times in your planning, because people will hear it. It's just like when you're at church and you're trying to make announcements, you got to make the announcements multiple times. I would say the same thing for fundraising is you're going to have to do it multiple ways and multle times.
And you're going to hear no a lot.
A lot.
And that's okay.
Celebrate your no's. Celebrate.
but also recognize this is in the work that we do here in this room and the rest of you who are joining us, it's ministry. And so what we're doing is not begging people to give us their cash. We are inviting people to put some financial skin in the game for the important work that is being done by your organization, by your congregation. It is a part of the celebration of God's abundance to participate in the ministry that's being done. And so if you can stop thinking about it always as, oh, now I'm going to have to ask again, or I'm going to have to make that uncomfortable money conversation, but rather an invitation to join in the joy of changing people's lives and transforming the world for the better. So.
Well, and I'll say I have this like wrinkly piece of paper that I keep on my wall. It's my favorite development quote, and it's really relevant. And it says, and it kind of goes along with the confidence. Don't make donors, it's by Jeff Brooks. Don't make donors guess what you're getting at, and don't assume you have their full attention. Ask clearly, ask repeatedly, ask with confidence and passion. Fundraising is for believers and fanatics who can hardly be settled if they try. Your cause is too important for caution or being settled. Being settled is the quick route to fundraising failure. And so I look at it every day.
I was going to say, for me, as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about a book I'm reading, thinking about Lent this year. And so it just asks the question, how do you feel when you're generous?
Right.
You feel you feel good. You feel strong, confident when you're generous and you're inviting other people to practice generosity in their own lives. And I think that's sort of strengthened me, not only as I think about Lent, but yeah, in terms of fundraising, was like yeah, I'm inviting you to be generous with me, and that's a gift.
Right. Yeah. It's for all of us, I think, and for all of you that are on, each of your organizations and your ministries have such special mission. And if the people who support you or who follow you care about you, that giving can be their way to care for you as well. If they can't at this point for whatever reason, or they're uninterested, you say thanks and you keep going. I think for fundraisers, that's important for us to keep in mind as well. You've got to keep going. Tell the story, keep asking. I'm not getting a hands up from Ayanna or Larry, but we are at the end of our hour. Oh, I just got it.
And we want to thank Leanne because she had to leave a little bit early. She had somewhere else to get to. And I know that was true for some of our attendees as well. So we want to thank Leanne for coming on. And we want to thank our attendees who are still on the call for your attention and your care with this topic by giving us your questions for us to wrestle with. So many thanks to our panel. Thank you, April, Yvonne, and Bethany, and Jordan. Wonderful work. Larry did post in the chat screen the websites of all the organizations represented by the panelists here. You have the opportunity to grab that chat if you want. In your chat window at the bottom right, there should be an option that says more. And at the very top, it should say Save Chat. So you should be able to do that. Otherwise, good old copy and paste works just fine. April, panelists, is there anything else you wanted to say as we wrap up?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity to listen to us get geeky about this stuff. Yeah, and all of our best wishes, I want to say, for all those who are logged on, the year is full and the year can be abundant, and that you're not alone. You have 4 new friends. If you want to reach out to us, send an email, including Ayanna and Larry and Leanne. Of course, you have lots of folks to be in touch with, and then to plan well and to go for abundance in this new year.
Excellent. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We do have a little bit of follow-up things that you may want to attend to. We have recorded this webinar, and you will get an email in the days to come with the link to how you can access this recording. In addition, we know we weren't able to get to all the questions, and so we've invited April, and hopefully our panelists will also be able to chime in to find a format by which to answer maybe a few more of those questions. We may do it via a blog with a Q&A format. We may do it by video and make a couple of short videos on fundraising basics. But we're excited to engage the questions that we heard here and the ones we didn't get to. So thank you so much for those contributions. All right, love and hugs and warmth and shelter to all of you. We pray God's blessings and God's abundance on you as you continue to do the work of God and the work among God's people. Be blessed.